Hey friends, wasn't it awesome when Google and Facebook started letting you use their login details to set up accounts with almost every major retailer and media site? Instead of remembering a ton of different login details, I just hit up a recipe box service, a streaming site, or an online store, and boom, I can make purchases or watch movies with just a few quick clicks. But I've sometimes wondered, what if someone broke into my Facebook or Gmail account? Wouldn't that mean that all my financials were at risk? Well, it turns out, it's way more than just my bank details that are up for grabs. If someone broke into that one account I use for all my purchases, they could steal my entire identity, take out loans in my name, or even commit cybercrimes that could be traced back to me. So imagine my relief when I found out about today's sponsor, NordPass, the new, cutting-edge password management system from the folks who brought us NordVPN. NordPass is way more than just a password manager. It's an essential cybersecurity tool that's both easy to use and gives you peace of mind. You can generate secure passwords which are all stored in one easy-to-find place, making it faster and more secure to log into all your favorite online stores. And if you're not already using a password generator at this point, you definitely should, as around 90% of the top 200 most common passwords are cracked in less than a second. Even a password you think is secure might take a computer program just 2 to 3 minutes to crack using an auto-generation program. NordPass also includes a password health checker, which ensures your passwords are impossible to auto-generate, as well as a data breach scanner, which gives you advanced warning of where and when a leak happens so you can ensure all your information is safe and secure. So, if you want to ensure that your online presence is as impenetrable as Fort Knox, I have some good news for you. Because once again, the Buttersock Cult has secured a whole month free of coverage when you head over to nordpass.com/letsread or use code LetsRead at the checkout. That's nordpass.com/LETSREAD for a whole month of free password management with NordPass. And without further ado, on with today's video. My dad used to be a deputy sheriff back in the 80s and 90s, and every so often, we get him to tell us some crazy stories from back in the day. Then this one night, me, my dad, and my brother are sitting around the fire pit my brother has in his backyard. We're just drinking beers, eating leftover barbecue, and it's ticking into the early morning when my brother starts talking about how he never heard any campfire ghost stories growing up. My dad laughs it off, telling him that regular old humans can be way scarier than any ghost story. So my brother asks if he'll tell us about the spookiest or creepiest call he ever got. Dad thinks it over for a minute or two, and as he does, the jovial look leaves his face and he starts to come over all serious. Then he says something about how there were plenty of close calls when it came to armed suspects and stuff like that, but those were a more adrenaline-based fear, not the kind of thing that really creeped him out. But then he tells us this one story about a kid who died in a really horrible way. Only it wasn't so much the way he died, it was the events leading up to it that really scared him. So, one morning, my dad gets a call that there's a body down by some railroad tracks, and when he arrives on scene, it's a total horror show. Body parts are everywhere, blood all over the tracks, and a complete and utter mess. He's trying to work out if it was an accident or somebody had taken their own life or something a little more sinister. So he heads over to some nearby houses to ask the owners if they saw or heard anything the previous day. Now, these houses are really, really close to the railroad tracks, so close that the security camera in this one guy's backyard, he'd been having trouble with some guy stealing tools from his backyard, actually faced the section of railroad where the kid's body had been found. My dad then asked the homeowner if he can review the footage just in case it caught anything important. And by pure happenstance, it just so happened to catch the whole thing. This kid, who had graduated high school just a month before, so in his late teens, walked up to the tracks in the middle of the night and just laid down on them like he was going to sleep. Obviously, this indicated that he was trying to take his own life, So they informed the family once they'd ID'd the body. But his family were completely and utterly flabbergasted by the idea. The kid had just gotten word that his application to Vanderbilt had been successful, his dream college ever since middle school apparently. His girlfriend had gotten into Belmont too, so they were planning on getting married once their studies had finished. They had this real high school sweetheart romance going, so it wasn't like some sudden breakup had caused him to go temporarily crazy. In the end, no matter how much they dug into the kid's life, there was just no obvious reason why he might choose to take his own life like this. He was an all-American boy. No drugs, no history of mental illness problems, and by all accounts, he had a great life ahead of him. So why would he ever choose to end it, especially in such a horrible way? Well, according to my dad, he doesn't think he did do it by choice, and it was all down to the way that he was walking towards the railroad tracks. He said the way the kid was walking was just plain odd. He wasn't swinging his arms at all. They were planted right by his sides, and even with the grainy security camera footage, you can tell that he had his head down, almost like he was asleep or something. This led them to explore the possibility that he had gotten really drunk, maybe even as a way of celebrating his acceptance into Vanderbilt. Some people, especially first-time drinkers or those that have drank heavily for the first time, sometimes have pretty weird or adverse reactions to alcohol, so he might have just been straight up wasted. But then after working that angle, there was absolutely no evidence that he drank any alcohol that night. Dad says they questioned local bars and checked their cameras, questioned the kids' friends while promising them that an admission of the truth would mean zero charges being leveled against them. They even went through the family's trash cans on the off chance that they might find an empty bottle or two. But like I said already, not a single trace of any alcohol consumption was found. My dad said it left him with this really creepy feeling that the kid had somehow been hypnotized or something. I'll be honest, me and my brother kind of cracked up at that point, not too much, and only out of like a break in the tension, a nervous laughter kind of thing, you know? I remember picturing the stereotypical thing of a dude with a chain watch swinging back and forth while saying, "You're feeling very sleepy." But obviously that's not what my dad meant, and he didn't find it in the least bit funny as we suggested that that's what he meant with his half-buzzed feigned bravado. It took him a second, but he rightfully corrected us that there's much more tangible ways to hypnotize a person. How he'd looked into it to discover that the use of suggestion and relaxation techniques can make a person do almost anything when the hypnotist has the right skills. I remember asking him if he honestly thought that that was the case, that some evil hypnotist had talked a kid into laying down on some railroad tracks. I mean, it sounds too far-fetched for even the weirdest horror movie, and as much as my dad agreed that it was a very, very out-there theory, he made an excellent counterpoint that the truth is sometimes much stranger than fiction could ever be. When all was said and done, neither my dad nor the rest of the department could figure out exactly why the kid did what he did that night, and they were forced to just chalk it up to him taking his own life, even though almost everything pointed to the idea that some other force was at play. Some of the other more religious deputies suggested that it might be some kind of evil spirit that took the kid in the prime of his life, making him do something that would snuff out all that potential while causing maximum pain and anguish to his family and friends. I'd like to think that we're all God-fearing people down here, my family included, but even that seemed like too much of a stretch for us. My dad brought us up to have a more philosophical interpretation of the scripture, not the very literal kind that had Baptist preachers spitting fire and brimstone from their pulpits. Dad must have worked like 1,000 different cases in his years, and surprise, surprise, it was never a demon or a spirit that robbed a store or was responsible for a hit and run. There was quite obviously always a human hand at work. He just couldn't see how it worked with the case of the kid and the railroad track. Like I said, in the end, the department had no choice but to list the cause of death as him taking his own life by train because, as much as they had their suspicions, there was no way to adequately identify any kind of malevolent influence over the kid. But just because he couldn't see it, doesn't mean it wasn't there. And the mystery of that poor kid's death haunted my dad for the rest of his law enforcement career. This experience is the reason why I'm deathly afraid of intruders breaking into my home. So I was 10 years old at the time, and it was summer break after finishing 5th grade. Maybe the second or third week of June. I don't really remember why, but my mom had to go to a dinner with some of her co-workers from the daycare that she worked at one night. She left my older sister, who was only 12, to watch over me. But my older sister was more so there to make sure that the house doesn't burn down rather than watching over me. So that night, my mom left for dinner and she said that she would be right back. I remember I was in the living room and my older sister was upstairs in her room. I was also downstairs with Fenrir, who was a black Newfoundland that I grew up with my entire life. Unfortunately, by the time I was 10, he was showing his age. He couldn't walk, run, or stand up like he used to. We would usually have to help him get up and walk him outside to the backyard, which had a porch. The porch had a walkway that we had built so Fenrir could walk down easier. We would also have to bring his food and water bowls over to him, as he was always too tired to get up. So I'm watching TV in the living room with Fenrir lying down by the side of the couch. Suddenly I hear this loud growling. I muted the TV, turned around, and saw my dog growling and snarling at something. He then started barking at something. I looked over and saw that he was directing his attention at the back door that led to the backyard, but I didn't see anything as it was pitch black outside. Suddenly, Fenrir just stood up with seemingly little to no effort and was violently growling and snarling and barking. Keep in mind, he hasn't been able to get up by himself in a while, so to just see him stand up like he was young again gave me quite the scare. I used to say that it was like as if Fenrir got possessed. And he was still directing his attention to the back door. Before I could react, Fenrir suddenly jogged over to the back door and got up on his hind legs and started scratching on the glass that was on the door, still growling and barking. At first, I thought that a squirrel probably got up to the porch and came up to the door. But then I remembered that Fenrir wasn't even this aggressive towards squirrels or other wildlife. When he would see one when he was younger, he would bark and chase it, yes, but it was more so to scare the squirrel off rather than to actually hurt it. And to add to that, Fenrir was not an aggressive dog. He was always sweet to people and other pets. He was also usually calm. So to see him going feral like that really did terrify me. He sounded like he wanted to kill something. I finally walked over to the back door that Fenrir was clawing at. I sort of pushed him away, surprised that he didn't snap at me, and I decided to put my face up against the glass to peek out and see if anything was there, but I didn't see anything. All the while, Fenrir was still scratching, growling, barking, and now baring his teeth and drooling to my right. I then walked to the right, where there was a light switch that turned on the porch lights, and Fenrir went back into his spot, scratching and growling and whatever he was upset about. And then I flipped on the light switch. And the second that happened, I saw a man dressed in all black, classic burglar outfit with gloves, a ski mask, and everything. At first, he was seemingly looking into the door with his face and hands pressed up against it. And when I turned on the lights, he got startled and took a few steps back. He then turned over to me and it was like time was frozen. We were both just frozen, staring at each other for a few seconds. And me being only 10 and not really knowing what to do, I quickly reached out to the knob of one of the back doors, more specifically the door that Fenrir was still scratching at, and swung the door open. The guy tried to run, but Fenrir was right on top of him. The guy wasn't even able to get off the porch before Fenrir latched onto him. When I say latched on, I mean latched on. Fenrir had first bitten down on the guy's leg and then moved and was biting down on the guy's arm. The guy tried to hit Fenrir off of him, but he just wasn't able to. And I was just frozen, staring down at Fenrir, really biting down on this guy. To be honest, I was more so scared of my own dog than the guy that was most likely going to break in, since I'd never seen him be this aggressive in my entire life. I actually thought that Fenrir was just going to straight up kill this guy. Eventually, the guy screams in agony, which I guess caused my sister to run downstairs to see what was going on. Not really sure why she didn't come downstairs when Fenrir was growling and barking the first time, but I digress. My older sister was freaking out and eventually did call 911. She then told me to go to the bedroom, which was also upstairs, so I did. I ran up to my bedroom and just stayed there, in shock of what I had just seen and the whole situation in general. A while later, the police showed up and my mom eventually showed up. She burst through my bedroom and basically gave me the tightest bear hug I'd ever gotten from her. I remember that she was also crying, worried sick that I was hurt. While I was shaken up, I wasn't physically hurt. At one point, I finally go downstairs and see my older sister talking to a police officer while Fenrir was lying down next to her with some blood on his face, kind of like Cujo. I remember thinking, oh my god, Fenrir just killed somebody. And then I also remembered that when I put my face up against the glass on one of the back doors to see what Fenrir was so angry about, I most likely put my face directly where the guy still had his face against it on the other side. So I made indirect eye contact with this guy before I turned on the lights without even knowing it. However, while the guy lost a lot of blood, he didn't die. And to be honest, I don't really know what happened to the guy afterwards other than he had to have gotten arrested. My mom was instantly looking into buying a new house and moving, and we all eventually moved when I was maybe 11 or 12. Unfortunately, before that, first, I had developed my intense fear of dealing with intruders, so much so that I couldn't look outside windows when it was pitch black outside for a while because I was afraid I was just going to see a face right there. And second, a few months before we moved, we had to put Fenrir down because he was just too old now. Needless to say that 2014, the year that my childhood and innocence died. I'm 18 years old now, and I have since been able to look outside windows when it's dark outside now. While I still am afraid of intruders, it's not really as bad as it used to be. When I move out, I'm definitely getting a big dog of my own. I will forever be thankful for you, Fenrir. Had it not been for you, who knows what that guy could have done to either me or my older sister. I'm a 27-year-old female, and I was at the laundromat today with my father and my 1.5-year-old. To kill some time between loads, I took my extremely active tot outside where he couldn't destroy things. There was a gas station about 30 yards next door, and there was a 6-foot chain-link fence halfway between that separates the lots. The area directly next to the laundromat that connected to the fence, though, was a little grassy, sandy, open area with one large tree right in the center. My son runs outside and turns and starts running around in this area laughing and playing, which is great. After about a minute, he starts running up diagonally towards the fence in the direction of the gas station. I'm laughing behind him, watching his little legs go, when all of a sudden, I hear footsteps approaching behind me, so I turn and look, and I kid you not, it was like the movie Get Out. This man was just straight knee to chest running straight towards my child with manic eyes. I bolted and scooped him up and darted back into the laundromat so fast. I glanced back over my shoulder when I was taking off, and the guy was now on his knees laughing and rolling around and just generally being a freak. I'm not sure if he was mentally ill or high, but I was shaking so bad because I had no clue what his intentions were. I used to work the docks of a salmon cannery in the middle of Alaska. 16-hour days, 7 days a week, no days off from May until August. Really cool job, but lots of seedy characters. Seasonal work in remote places seems to attract people who don't really fit in with normal society or people who want to get away from something. Gary was one of those people. He had worked at another cannery in town that was owned by the same parent company, and in the lead-up to fishing season, he was lent to our cannery for some carpentry tasks. Gary was probably in his 40s or 50s, gray hair, weird delivery in his speech. Not like a speech disorder, just like weird, like he was smiling inside about something grotesque while he spoke. When he first got to our camp, he was telling me the HR staff kept asking him all these personal questions. I asked what kind of questions, and he responded that they wanted his full name and phone number. He told them that he didn't feel comfortable with that and would be willing to work for a reduced rate if he could just keep that information to himself. Red flag right there. One day I'm working with a coworker on a little welding project when Gary pops out of a doorway. He goes, "Hey, you guys want some meat?" We've been eating cafeteria food for weeks and working hard enough that we always maintain a caloric deficit. You don't say no to food. He cut us each off a slice. Smoked something. I don't know what it was. Now here's some personal information about me. My family is Eastern European. I was born in New York City and then spent half of my childhood in North Carolina. I've been eating smoked meats of every variety all my life. It's a piece of my culture, basically. I don't know what this was. It was almost pork, but it was not pork. Gary goes, "You guys like that?" To which we respond sheepishly, "Yeah. Thanks, Gary." Gary literally laughs, like slowly and creepily, and just leaves. Now me and the guy I'm working with just look at each other and laugh it off and say, well, we just ate Gary's wife. Dark vibes, but I love that job. Anyway, later that night, I'm in the cafeteria alone eating a bagel. Gary walks in. "Hey man, you like that meat earlier?" "Yeah, Gary. It was good," I respond. Gary goes, "That's funny, man," and laughs softly. I'm pretty sure that I ate a slice of Gary's wife. I was 20, living alone on the ground floor of an apartment building. My living room windows faced the small parking lot for the building, which wasn't gated. I'd stayed up late, watching TV or playing games almost every night. It was winter when I first moved in, so I'd have the blinds down at night to help keep the cold air out. Summer came and there was no AC in the apartment, so I'd open the windows and blinds at night for cool air. One night, I'm lying on the couch watching TV when I get that feeling of being watched. I looked over at the window and a man had his hands and face pressed against the screen, merely 3 feet from where I was lying, just watching me. I let out a blood-curdling scream and he didn't even blink. Terrified, I jumped up, grabbed the phone and screamed that I was calling the cops. He still just stood there, completely motionless and dead-eyed. At that point, I yelled that I'm getting the neighbor and started walking to the door, and he finally took off. I locked the window and stayed up all night, completely on edge. My boyfriend at the time came over and stayed for a full week. He made sure to leave the blinds open and sat at the edge of the couch closest to the window to make it known that I wasn't always alone. The creeper didn't show up again, so eventually I got comfortable thinking it was an isolated incident of some rando wandering around the parking lot to break into cars. Maybe another 3 weeks after that, I get home late from waiting tables and park in the lot. I get changed, grab a snack, and head to the living room to play games. I start to raise the blinds to open the windows and let in cool air, and the creeper is standing right there with his face pressed against the screen again. He was not standing in the parking lot when I pulled in, as I parked right by my window. I can only assume that he was waiting around the corner of the building, watching me come home and timing my movements. This time, I grabbed the phone and immediately called the cops. I was shaking, crying, completely hysterical, and the creeper takes off. Cops come and say that they'll have someone patrol the block when they can, and my boyfriend immediately comes over. He wants to stay with me until I can get out of there, so I start looking at different apartments. Another 3 to 4 weeks or so later, I have an apartment lined up on a high floor in a dormant building because, at this point, screw it. My boyfriend had to go out of town for a few days, so I decided to go stay at my friend's place because I certainly wasn't going to be there alone. I'm at my friend's place for 2 nights, but wanted to run home and grab a few things that I'd forgotten. She goes with me for obvious reasons, and we go in the afternoon, not after dark. We decided to hang out for a bit and play games together because it's daylight and there is activity around the building. No air conditioning, so I hesitate raising the blinds to get some air. I'm terrified opening them now. Then just laugh to myself because I do it, and of course, no one's there. I open the actual window and see 2 large holes cut into the screen right above the latches you push in to lift it. They were literally not there 2 days ago, and my blood ran entirely cold. The creeper knew my boyfriend was gone. He was watching and saw his car was gone. I'd left my car there as my friend picked me up, and we always left a light on in the living room to make the creeper think that we were awake. So he saw my car, thought I was home, saw the light on, yet proceeded to cut holes in the screen to break in. I have no idea if he actually gained access, but seeing how bold he was terrified me. How long had he been watching me, learning my patterns, and getting gradually more aggressive with every interaction? I still sometimes get a chill when I raise my blinds, and it took a long time getting comfortable living in anything but a high-rise. Thanks for the lifelong PTSD, you absolute creeper. This actually happened a few hours ago, and I'm still unsettled about the whole encounter. I decided to drop it over here to get it out of my system. I've had creeps tailgate me or try to grab my attention on the road, and I just ignore them, which always worked. But this guy takes the golden medal. My shift starts at the afternoon, and I was feeling off for most of the day. A beautiful sunny day, mind you. You know, one of those days where you drag yourself out of your bed to adult, as they say. I decided to lift my mood up, so I wore something new that I had. A beautiful creamy white fox fur vest, and I hit the road. Look like $1 million, feel like $1 million, right? Maybe not. I played some piano tracks and hoped that I'll get out of this funk. I just needed something to comfort me, and those 2 things didn't cut it. While I was driving to work, I decided to grab a drink. An ice crisp green tea will definitely lift my spirit. There were 2 branches of a famous coffee shop. You know who, a grinning mermaid who's playing Twister. Ring the bell? I could have gone to the first one with the drive-thru, but they use a pretty terrible tea brand as they ran out of the good stuff. So I had to go to the one that was inside a mall. Anything to feel better, right? I parked my car and I saw a private fleet of black SUVs, making it difficult to view the entrance. This is important for later. I grabbed a cold bottle of water and headed to the counter. I paid for my drink and got a cherry lollipop, cause why not? Waited for my drink, and once I got it, I started walking out. I had to pass a fountain in the courtyard before I can reach the exit. I slowed my pace as I noticed that I was walking too fast. I felt a bit off, but brushed it off. As I passed between the SUVs, a bus shot through quickly. I stopped in shock as I almost walked in its path. This didn't make me realize what was happening, as I got distracted and wasn't aware of my surroundings. As I walked further, I had to pass an area where there isn't anyone. It was shaded, but still outdoor. Almost like under a bridge-style building, if that makes sense. This was the way to my car. I noticed that I wasn't aware of my surroundings till I heard footsteps on my right. Then I saw a man in my peripheral vision walking and matching my speed. At first, I thought he was in a uniform, so I assumed he was a part of the cleaning staff in the mall. I felt off, but I told myself that I'm being paranoid and overthinking. Next to my car and on my left side was a woman with a child who were getting into their car, and this will make sense later. I was sandwiched between my car and hers. I was getting my keys out of my fur vest, and then I had to turn around in order to open the driver's door as I was a bit ahead of it. Once I turned, I saw a man standing, looking to be in his late 30s, skinny, average height. He had a dark blue baseball cap with sunglasses, a gray shirt with some print on it and black sweatpants, Crocs shoes with socks. He was so close that it took me by surprise and I was startled. But being nice and polite is in my blood, so I assumed nothing. First thing that he said was, "Why are you afraid?" I told him that I wasn't and asked him what he wanted. "Is your car for sale?" He said while grinning. I said no. Then he started to ask how my day was going and stuff along those lines. The heck? I don't know this guy. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I smiled as not to escalate the situation. I knew I had to do something. He was blocking my way to the mall entrance, and if I decided to go the other way, which is a pretty large shaded parking lot with few people here and there. It was nice to meet you, but I gotta leave," I said while smiling. "Give me your phone number," he said bluntly. I just repeated the same phrase and took a step closer to my door as I didn't want to show him that I was afraid, though I was pooping bricks at that moment. And then he said something that made me want to crawl out of my skin. "Give me your phone number so I don't have to chase you around in my car." At this moment, I knew I had to move fast, so I opened my door and ignored him. He kept talking and I wasn't sure what he was saying as it felt muffled. My anxiety was higher than the tip of Mount Everest now, and I was hit with this realization that even in public spaces and in broad daylight with people around, you can lose your sense of safety in a split of a second. I closed the door quickly and locked it. My fingers felt weak, but I managed to turn on the car. He kept knocking on my window. He was so insistent. I put my car in reverse, but I couldn't back out. The woman was halfway getting out of her parking spot, thus forcing me to wait. He kept knocking pretty hard and saying different things, and at that moment I honestly couldn't hear him. All I wanted was just to nope out of there. I was so afraid and just baffled. I had to look at the window to see when the road will get clear so I can back out while he was standing in front of my window rapidly knocking it. I avoided making eye contact with him. Once the road was clear, I hit the gas pedal and sped off. I drove to random places while my eyes are fixed on my rearview mirror to make sure that he wasn't following me. It was so hard to breathe as my chest felt so heavy and my heart was beating out of my chest. I was glad he wasn't there. This creep followed me around the mall and waited for the right moment that I was alone and threatened me for me to give him my phone number and was just completely unaware of how creepy he was. My therapist will definitely be hearing about this. I'm Mahdi, and I'm 16 years old. I live in Morocco and just lived through a creepy event, and I'm so excited to be able to share it here. So here's my story. I lived in an apartment with my family, and I'm in a period where I need to focus for my final exams. Today, as usual, I'm sick, so I didn't go to school. I used this free time to practice more for the upcoming tests, and at approximately 8 p.m., my father called me and suggested me a car ride in order to spend time with each other. My parents are divorced, so when I'm with my mother, I see him less often than my mother. So I was with my father for like 30 minutes, and it was nice. We arrived in front of the building where I live with my mother. I said goodbye to him, and I went towards the building. I pushed the button of the intercom so that my mother opens the door for me, and then I saw a food deliverer with his motorcycle parked just next to me. And here comes the problem. I thought that he was going to deliver something to a neighbor, nothing unusual here, but there was something off. Firstly, usually deliverers in Morocco, I don't know if it is the case in other countries, have like a box where they store the food in order to keep it warm. But this guy didn't have one. He was holding the bag with the food in his hand while riding the motorcycle. Also, he opened his phone, like as if he was going to check a delivery app, but as I said, he didn't have the box or the logo of a delivery service anywhere on him. So even if my mother unlocked the door, I preferred not to open and talk to the guy. I order from restaurants and fast food a lot, and I'm used to seeing deliverers and even talk a little bit with them to try and make them laugh. I know that it's a hard job because of people being jerks, so I try to be as friendly as possible. So I start by saying hi and how you doing in Moroccan, and the guy was super nice. He had a great smile and a nice way of talking, but he took time before answering me, like as if though he was lagging. But it's okay, it happens. Maybe he was stressed or preoccupied, so nothing to worry about. I asked him what door number it is, and he replied 42, which is odd because the last door of the building is the 14th. So I told him to check the app, and then I tried to watch his phone even though I'm not next to him, and instead of opening a delivery app, he opened WhatsApp and didn't even open a chat. Then he said door 11. And at this moment, I knew something was wrong because I live at the 12th door, and so the 11th door is right next to me, and I'm sure that my neighbors weren't the ones to order because they were on a trip. So then I got a little bit stressed and told him that it must have been an error because of the reason that I just told you, but he insisted to go in and told me that he used to deliver at this address and that he knows where he needs to go. He also tells me that the customer knows him and that he asked him to be quick because he liked his food to be as hot as possible. I clearly said to him that I couldn't let him enter the building, but that I was going to check if the guys of the 11th door were back from their trip, and if so, I was going to let them know that he was here. I also told him that the guard of the building was usually in the cafe next door and that he could go talk with him. I also lied to him and told him that my dad was waiting for me and that I needed to go to the bathroom for a second. He was angry at first, but he immediately changed his attitude and became friendly again. I asked him to step aside, and then I asked again my mother to unlock the door and entered. I was still nervous, and while I was walking towards the elevator, I got suddenly really scared because I didn't hear the door close behind. I felt so dumb because I could have closed it myself, but at this moment, I was sure that he was entering the building. I immediately started running towards the staircase, and at that same time, he tried to throw the bag that he was holding at me. I don't know why, but he missed me. At this moment, I'm thinking really quickly. I have Crohn's disease, which, to be short, is a disease that causes inflammation of the intestines and pain, but according to my doctor, it also explains why I'm an anxious person and why I usually think too much. And so, I already thought in the past of a scenario where I needed to hide from something in the building. I know it's weird, but I came to the conclusion that the underground parking garage was the best place, because it was really large due to the fact that it was shared by 4 different buildings. So I run towards the staircase and I immediately started going downstairs. Before I continue, I need to say that I'm a pretty tall guy, about 6'3", so it's difficult for me to hide easily. And so I run and I can hear him chasing me. At this moment, I remember that the other buildings have their own doors in the parking lot, so I run towards one of them. I see someone from afar and start screaming for them to call the landlord as quickly as they can. But he didn't react and then entered one of the doors. I go upstairs, open the door of the building, and enter the bakery just next to it. Luckily, I find the caretaker, or the concierge, I don't know how you say it in English, but I explain to him really quickly what's happening. He immediately got out of the bakery and started chasing him, but he was too far away and was running towards his motorcycle, so we couldn't catch him. I was tired of all that running, but strangely, I wasn't shocked at all. And still, while writing this, I feel a little bit excited about what happened. I feel weird for kind of liking it, but I'm definitely not going to tell my parents because otherwise they will forbid me to go out alone or take a taxi. I try to look out for the bag that he tried to throw at me, but it wasn't there when I checked back. I know I'm selfish for not calling the police, but I prefer not to worry about it because, fortunately, they never did anything too serious. This happened in 2019, but it's still in the back of my mind. I worked at Chick-fil-A. That night I was supposed to close, but I left at like 8 p.m.-ish. I already know I'm going to spend like 30 to 45 minutes driving around to my usual Pokemon stops for Pokemon Go. At 8 p.m. on Wednesday, there's some cars on the roads, but not many. Smaller town with little police presence, not much crime happens here. I've done this before. I know which spots to go to. I'm driving to the spots I know I can reach from the inside of my car. Just got off of work from standing and being busy all day. I wasn't about to go walking around when it was dark out anyways. The places I know have little to no cars at them. I pull into the parking lot by the high school field, spin the stops, and click on a few Pokemon. I get ready to pull on a residential street. I'm kind of just sitting at the stop sign for a bit. No cars behind me. I'm not really in a hurry. Blinkers on. Then I turn left onto the street. I see two cars in front of me, an older white SUV and a sedan in front of that. They're about 4 blocks ahead. I notice the SUV isn't really in its lane. It's driving in the middle of the road like it wants to pass the sedan. It definitely could have just passed it. The road was really wide and no oncoming cars. I'm glancing down at my phone in the cup holder, trying not to go too fast, kind of wanting the walking points. Then I notice the white SUV that was driving in the middle of the road is driving really slow on the shoulder of the road. Maybe they notice me, wondering what I'm doing. Maybe I'm weirding them out. I click my phone shut and just start driving normally. I'm nearly behind the SUV now and it speeds up quickly, takes a hard right onto a street. I see the SUV pull into a driveway. As I'm passing that side street, I see the SUV going in reverse and now it's backing out of that driveway. I'm behind the other sedan now at a 4-way stop. In my rearview mirror, the white SUV is turning back on the street. It's now going to be behind me. The sedan waits its turn at the 4-way stop, then turns left. I wait my turn, then go straight. I'm watching to see if the white SUV goes straight too, and it does. The SUV had to wait its turn at the 4-way stop, so I'm a good 4 to 6 blocks ahead on this residential street. I want to lose this car, so I'm going like 30 miles per hour when the speed limit is probably 20 to 25. I turned behind the church strip mall. The church has a playground behind it, but it's pretty much an alleyway. I lost the SUV. I stopped in the alley, waiting, looking in my side mirror, and sure enough, the white SUV is barreling down the street. It almost passed me, it was going so fast, but it spots me and turns into the alley where I'm parked, coming towards my car. I'm freaked out at this point. This alley street is dark and there's no street lights. The stores in the strip mall are abandoned, but the church is on the other side and it's well lit, so I want to go there. I speed down the alley and around the building. The SUV is doing the same thing. I turn around the building, can't see them in my rear view. I stop my car and park in front of the well-lit church doors, basically parked in the first lane. I'm watching my rearview mirror, waiting for this car. I know it's back there and it's going to drive around me. We'll see that it was all just a misunderstanding. The SUV is there. It peeks around the building corner, then stops and waits a little bit before it turns towards where I'm parked. The SUV slowly drives by my car. They pass me slowly and I don't want to look at them. From my peripheral vision, I just see one outline in the driver's seat. As they pass me, I can feel this person's eyes on me and can see their head turning. I'm uncomfortable, but I don't want to start a conversation with them, so I don't roll down my windows and I do not want to look at them. I don't want to acknowledge them. I really just want them to see that I'm not who they probably thought that I was. They pass me completely and the SUV starts to drive towards the exit of the parking lot. But then the SUV starts to circle around again, making a big loop around in the empty church parking lot. My body fills with this feeling of dread. I'm actually scared now. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, but now they're coming back around. I don't want to know what they want anymore. When they start to circle back around, I take off out of that parking lot, but so do they. My car bottoms out and I speed down the street. So does theirs. The police station is way out near the countryside on the outskirts of town, but there's a police annex on this street. Sometimes there's cops parked out front. I know I'm just going to park there, and if they're still following me, I'll call 911. This car is following me 100%. They've turned when I've turned, sped when I've sped, and as I turn my blinker to take a right into the annex, they turn left, and they're gone. I told my friends and family about this quickly after. No one I knew drove that kind of car. It was also an older model, so I don't think that it could have been a rental. I don't know anyone who would do this to me and think it's funny. I did make a police report, but didn't get a license plate, so they couldn't really do anything. I also know what kind of car it was. I would notice any older white SUV for months after, but I never saw that exact car again. This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19. My foster sister, Kira, was 16. For the sake of the story, it's important to know that I was female presenting and hadn't come out as trans yet, nor was I presenting myself in an overtly masculine style at the time. It was the summer before I was going to college, and I mostly lived with my mom and Kira except for every other weekend, where I'd stay with my dad. Now, summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a bad habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 or 7 p.m., because that's when it'd be cooler but still light outside. On this particular evening, Mom wasn't going to be home until late, though I don't remember the exact reason why. She's a woman that likes to stay busy and often participates in choirs, Bible studies, youth group events, classes, and the like, so it wasn't uncommon for Kira and I to be left home alone until 8 or 9 p.m. So, it was up to me and Kira to walk the dogs by ourselves, unless we wanted our younger dog Samson to throw tantrums due to pent-up energy. Even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked them down our street, Kira and I decided to drive out 20 minutes to a park instead. Why? I don't remember. It could have been anything from being bored walking our roads to not wanting to have to deal with blind curves and hills. Whatever the reason, at around 7:30 p.m., Kira and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in the car, and drove to the park. Let me quickly explain the layout of the park so it's easier to understand why we got nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long looping road with its attractions like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall, spaced about in the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at the end. Thus, it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions, but not if you're walking in the same direction, obviously. Any cars on this road can only drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car, we clipped our dog to leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often, we'd stop so I could take pictures for our good boys, particularly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who pulls like his life depends on it and weaves around because he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man who looked to be in his 40s walked past us, walking the same direction we were, up towards the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kira, nodded, said hello or cute dogs or something like that, and kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We're at a park at a time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I am are generally friendly. Smiling and saying hi is pretty normal, no matter who says it. We smiled back, said hi or thanks depending on what he said, and that was that. Or so we thought. This man passed us again only 10 minutes later, directly across from where we'd seen him previously. Just like he did before, he smiled and said hi. This time, Kira and I looked at each other once he was already ahead of us and said, "Well, that was weird." Just 10 minutes earlier, he had passed us walking up towards the playground and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us. This time, though, he cut in front of us, and he did it in a way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. Heck, he even nearly touched Kira with how close he was walking. That was already weird in and of itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. The only way he could have done that was if he had cut across the inside of the loop, since it would have been close to impossible to pass us at our certain point from the other direction if he decided to walk the opposite way of the loop than us. It came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again. But, just like before, Kira and I brushed this weirdness off. The guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Besides, we had 2 reasonably sized dogs with us. Who'd mess with us? Not even 5 minutes later, this man passed us again. once again cutting so close past us that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kira. Again, he smiled and said hi before walking off. This was officially the moment I decided we needed to leave. Sure, it's normal to pass a person at least 2 times walking this loop if you're going in opposite directions, but doing so takes a while. You have to at least get to the parallel spot in the loop from where your paths first intersected to see each other again. But the time between running into the guy and the location we passed each other didn't match up in a way that didn't look suspicious. Plus, I really wasn't a fan of how he cut across us. The first time, he passed us like a normal person, walking faster than us would, albeit a little close. The second time, he cut in front of us from the opposite direction instead of walking around us, to the point that we had to stop to avoid running into him. This third time, however, he walked up behind us, then did this weird directionally slant walk to cross the street and go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. So yeah, I told Kira to hustle so we could get to our car and get out instead of doing a second loop, so that's what we did. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second, it stopped too. We figured he was getting ready to park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon after we did, so we stopped again, and the car stopped with us. This is when Kira got nervous. We hadn't seen the middle-aged guy since the third cutoff, so we figured that we had overthought the whole thing. But here we were, with this tinted window car acting incredibly sus. Was it the same guy, back with his car? A different guy? We couldn't tell. Before anything could happen, though, another car idled up to the one next to us, and whoever it was sped up to the expected 5 miles per hour. We got to our car pretty fast after that and practically picked up the dogs to get them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rearview mirror and the well-advised rule not to drive straight home if you're worried a stranger's taken too much interest in you. I was anxious, dumb, and primarily concerned with getting home where we could be safe. Because home is safe, right? Nothing bad is supposed to happen to you there, right? My naive false sense of security. I think we got home around 8-something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, but it wasn't fully dark yet. Just that dusty purple color the sky gets before it finally accepts that it's nighttime. Mom wasn't home yet, so we got the dogs some water, locked the doors, ate a late dinner, and chilled in the living room, talking about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened. There, Kira and I were, sitting on different couches, talking about something or other when we noticed the ceiling briefly light up over where Kira was sitting. An important note here is that Kira was sitting on a small couch with her back to the window that faces the front of the house, while I was on the couch on the opposite wall where I could see a sliver of the front porch. Likewise, right next to Kira was our front door, which has 3 small rectangular windows on it. Due to our long, slightly curvy driveway, it's common to see headlights stream through that window, light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. It means someone's just got home. So when the ceiling above Kira lit up, we thought nothing of it, assuming Mom was finally coming back from wherever she went that night, and we didn't take any notice of the light skipping the final arc of someone pulling all the way up the driveway either. We also didn't pay any mind to how long it was taking Mom to come inside. Mom has a habit of pulling in, then checking her phone for God knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed the small motion sensor light Mom set up on a table on the porch light up again. Again, I could only see a sliver of space based on my position in the curtains. Basically, I could see a smidge of the table and the rails bordering our porch, but not its stairs or anything approaching the door depending on how they approached it. I wasn't paying much attention either because I assumed it was my mom. Right after the light went off, we both heard the storm door open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggling the door handle like Mom usually does right away. The moment that the storm door creaked open, our 2 dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like mad. Our golden greyhound mix Calvin has a deep, scary bark which contradicts his adorable appearance. Samson, our dumb goofball son who is incapable of hurting a fly, but a big boy, jumps up on his hind legs and scrambles to find perches on one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who's outside. Immediately, the storm door slammed shut, and we heard heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kira's couch, standing on its back instead of the cushions to look out the window. Samson ran out of the room and went out to the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which has a ramp going down into a fenced-off portion of our yard. I couldn't move. I've never understood really what it meant when people describe their limbs turning to lead until that moment. It felt like I didn't have limbs, really. Like moving wasn't an option. If I moved, I might glimpse something or someone through the windows. The person could see me running around the house, freaking out, and decide to come after us after all. So I sat there, my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up and limbs refused to move. In the game of fight, flight, or freeze, I'm the freezer. Kira, on the other hand, is a fighter. She spins around and looks out the window but can't see anything because, besides the motion light on the porch, it's too dark. So naturally, she gets up, grabs a stray dog toy, which just so happens to be a tug-of-war rope with a ball on one end, and opens the door. I tell her, very calmly, to shut the door and stay inside. She ignored me and stepped out onto the porch. She comes back inside after not seeing anything, but to my utter disbelief, she disappears to the kitchen, comes back with a knife, and goes outside again. This time, she's gone for a handful of seconds before running back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she tells me she went out a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog kennel we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved. This time, she listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to call Mom despite my head being empty and my limbs being lead, and she convinced me to get up, make sure all the doors are locked, including the basement, and making sure the dogs were inside. I ended up making Kira go into the fenced-up section to drag Samson back inside because I couldn't get my legs to move after thinking about doing it myself. Cowardly, I know. After Mom got home and looked around, finding nothing, we called the non-emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense that they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with exaggerated imaginations. Still, they humored us and told us, after we told them about the park, that if we think anyone might be following us or if someone's acting a little too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone's following us. And then they left. To this day, I'm pretty sure that the only people who believe someone with malicious intent came to our home in hopes of finding 2 teenage girls is Kira and me. Though whether or not whoever it was the guy from the park, we're not sure. But it's too coincidental, isn't it? That the day we have multiple encounters with this guy who goes out of his way to get close to us and a car inches along behind us, we also have an almost intruder-type encounter. Plus, there were too many details that didn't add up to us having overly excited imaginations. We both saw headlights. The motion detector on the porch turned on. The storm door opened and stayed open until Samson jumped up to look out the door's window. We heard footsteps. Kira saw someone. And the dogs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one was there. I don't know if whoever was at our house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. If it was, I don't know if the reason he cut in front of us as close as he did was to test how our dogs would react to him, and them not caring at all, or the first time wagging their tails convinced him that they weren't a threat. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we stopped. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary, manic bark, or if Samson wasn't tall enough to look out the high windows in the door. I don't know much of anything. What I do know is this. If you're out and about minding your own business and a stranger is taking a lot of notice of you, following you, frequently running into you or whatever, trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home. Meander, get to a public place, or just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who is watching you. This story is from 2019. I was 13 years old at the time, but I still remember it like it was yesterday, possibly due to the trauma. I was bored at home. I FaceTimed my best friend, who lives in the apartment building next to mine, and asked him if he would join me on a walk around the neighborhood. He wasn't there. He was on his way back home from school, which is understandable because it was a Thursday afternoon. There is a jogging circuit near my house. It's like 500 meters away. Due to my massive boredom, I put on my sport clothes, a basic t-shirt, a short, the short has no pockets, remember this detail, and then I was headed with my music vibing to the circuit. Arriving there was surprisingly not that empty at around 8 to 10 people in that 15-kilometer circuit. I started walking for a bit, then ran for a couple kilometers, then laid down in the grass. I noticed two guys on a motorcycle going back and forth. I didn't care that much since I was FaceTiming my two best friends. It was getting pretty late. It was around 6 p.m. and I was exhausted. I walked home, but I took another path, and this is kind of off of a shortcut. I had to walk through an empty big street with buildings and construction. I took this same path many times before with no problems. I had a feeling that someone was watching me and following me. I turned around and noticed the same two guys on that motorcycle headed toward me, and I whispered to my friends on FaceTime that something weird is going to happen and that they have to cut their mics and focus with me. The guys came by and one of them asked me where's the nearest barber shop. Out of stress, I gave them a random location. While the rider of the bike asked me about the barber shop, my right eye twitched and unfocused. I do have this ability, but I was still able to see with it. I saw on the bike's rearview mirror that the other guy was trying to look at where my phone is located. It was between my shorts and my belly because I had no pockets and I had my earphones on. I was freaking out. Time was starting to slow down. Seconds felt like hours and I couldn't feel my legs anymore. They went on, but with a slow speed, it was like they were planning a backup plan. I had three options. One, there was a taxi guy fixing his car. I could have went to him and explained the situation, but my gut said, what if they noticed me and came back and maybe do what they planned to do? Two, stop a random car and hop in, then explain the situation. My gut said no, what if the car was locked, plus the guys would have noticed that I knew what they were planning to do and came to me after the random car left. And three, and this is what I chose, run in the opposite direction into the traffic and take the path that I came by. I instinctively ran for a straight 5 minutes. Couldn't do it anymore. I entered a field and started running again towards some slums. I looked back and saw the guys coming after me into the field, and one of them was just screaming to just stop, but they just wanted to know where the barber shop was. There's one thing about me, and it is that I always trust my gut, and it said, no, run as fast as you can or you will die today. And that's what I did. I ran between the slums and kept running until I arrived near my best friend's house, who I was still in FaceTime with, and I told him to come downstairs right now, and I lay down in the parking lot. He came in and was freaking out because he knew that something was happening but didn't know what since I didn't give him any more information. My face turned yellowish and I threw up and I couldn't feel my legs nor my arms anymore. He walked me to my house and I laid down, and from that moment, I don't remember anything. I just remember me waking up the following day with bruises on my legs due to me running into the field full of pikes. And this whole story happened in the space of maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Now I take that same path again with no worries. I have no idea what the intentions of those men truly were. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, finish your meat where you can't have any pudding.